Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ethereum Core Developer Meeting number 96. I'm your host, Hudson, and we're going to be talking about a good amount of stuff today, so we'll jump into it. I just updated the agenda. If y'all will refresh your page, it should reflect the latest request from the agenda comments. Um, and so the first item, we were going to do EIP and upgrades updates for YOLO and YOLO V2, but because it was a holdover from last time, let's go over EIP 1057 first. So Tim's going to facilitate that part of the discussion because it was requested that someone other than me facilitate that discussion. And so that decisions can be made more clearly, was my understanding. So, Tim, go right ahead.
Okay, so I know that Greg, you had an update last time and things you wanted to go over. I think it probably makes sense for us to just start there for you to maybe give like a, I don't know, 30-second summary of where things are at and what you'd like to see as a decision moving forward. And I think one thing that's like not been good in the process for this is just there's been like a lot of implicit decision, like, so maybe it'd be good for people to, I don't know, to try and get something more explicit about where we stand on this after Greg has kind of shared his thoughts. Yeah, Greg, over to you.
Okay, unmuted. Yeah, this the Prague POW proposal has had a long and unhappy history. I think it was May of 2018 that it was first proposed. We reviewed it, tentatively accepted it after about 7 months of review. People then woke up, got very angry. There was a lot of pressure. We had a software audit, a hardware audit. We took it up again. We decided that yes, we were going to put it in. We published numbered decisions to do so. 2 weeks later, there was another outcry. Some people came on the call who weren't usually there. One of them insulted us terribly. And somehow at the end of the call, the decision of the previous 2 weeks had evaporated. And in discussion since then, it was rather not clear what had happened, but the most that we could decide is that people were more or less happy with Ben DiFrancesco's compromise. And where I'd like to get to today is either a decision that we actually publish and actually stand by, that we don't intend to change it without further serious discussion, to go with that compromise. And that compromise we've stated at the very top of the current PR, and we'll remove it once there's a decision one way or the other, because it's usually not the thing that would go into an EIP. But what we've got here, Prague POW, people should know by now, is a proof of work algorithm to replace ETH-hash. ETH-hash was designed to be ASIC resistant, and it no longer is. The ASICs have caught up, and Prague POW is proposed to make it very, very difficult for ASICs to get an advantage over GPUs. And there's every reason to think by now that it will succeed, and every reason to believe that it's a sound algorithm without any bugs, and without any design errors. So we do not propose that we deploy it immediately or that we choose a hard fork right now. The compromise Ben recommended will state as that we should fully implement it and test it across major clients. I believe that is actually already true for a lot of clients. And that the clients who do implement this proposal, we should deploy on a test net and maintain it on a test net ready to go. um, to leave open the possibility and threat of future deployment. That means we can keep an eye on the network, try to keep an eye on what hardware is mining the network and what they're doing. And if we don't like the way it's going because of ASICs, we can switch to the prog POW hash function and kick the ASICs off of the network. And hopefully people in the business of making ASICs will be aware of this, and they can factor that into their business decisions as to whether making Ethereum ASICs is the best use of their resources. Um, and that's where it is now. So let's open up discussion on that.
Question. I'm curious about this kick exploit that was later determined that it was not actually practically feasible, and what happened with the specification. Was the specification changed, or did you undo those changes, and what's the latest spec?
Yeah, the
version?
latest PR. We spent many months looking at that exploit. There is a fix that would make it impossible for that or any similar exploit, but Kick's exploit, we've decided, is literally impossible. You can't pull it off. There's all kinds of obstacles. And if you get past all of those, in the end, other clients will look at the blocks you're producing and reject them because their hash is wrong. Um, Andrea, if he made it online, can explain that in some detail if people are really interested. But it's not an exploit that's of any use. You've got to make your own ASIC. You've got to brute force a table within the block time. You've got to modify the headers in a way that you're not currently allowed to modify them. It's just not exploitable. And there's things you could do to make it exploitable, but that only makes it more complicated. And more resource intensive. So it's just not an issue. We don't think it's worth trying to fix, given that we've already audited the code and algorithm we have. So the spec's been changed just to move that down to the security section so that people know it's there. If in future we think that somehow someone's found a way to get around this, we can drop the fix in. Yeah, because it didn't take but a few days to find a fix. There was also a vulnerability which the software audit found. And that's actually an ETH hash vulnerability as well. It's nearly impossible to do on ETH hash right now. A few years down the line with better hardware, maybe. With prog POW, that vulnerability, it wasn't clear from what the audit thought and from what we thought that it's even possible to exploit. So again, we're not putting it into the current proposal, although the security section does discuss it a little bit as to why we've decided to let that be not worth messing with audited code to put in fixes for vulnerabilities that are damn near impossible to exploit.
And that's the light hash evaluation attack.
Right.
Okay.
Pretty much, if we don't think it's worth fixing ETH hash, it's not worth fixing prog POW, where it's not even clear you can exploit it.
So they have the same level of vulnerability, or is there still a difference, but it's unclear, but it's not worth doing an extra amount?
on current hardware, it's almost impossible to exploit with Ethash, and Prog POW makes it so much more difficult. It isn't clear you'll ever be able to exploit it.
Okay, so it's the case that they both have it, but Ethash
Yeah.
has it is at a greater risk, although still low, and
Right.
ProgPow has it as a less risk, and it's not worth doing anything else about because it's
Yeah.
so much less.
Somewhere 3, 4, 5 years down the line, Ethash might become more vulnerable.
Question. So, with do you guys know if the current implemented version in the Go Ethereum parity do you know if it needs any change?
No, this is the code that's been audited. This is a code that's been running. So we're proposing to stick with that code. I think in some clients it was implemented well over a year ago. And the reference implementation's been there for a long time.
So basically, if we were to say, yes, we should go ahead with this compromise, the task at hand would be to merge it and activate it and run it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the ask here, I think on the technical side, it's very little. Am I right on that, Martin?
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
so.
So the bigger ask is that I am not presenting this as yet another delay. I'm presenting this as we remain serious about this, and we remain serious about not letting A6 become a threat to the network. That pretty much whatever the community sentiment is, and sentiment being defined as feelings, I'm not concerned about people's feelings. I'm concerned about the security of the network, and we have to keep a close eye on that. And we do have a way to shut down the A6 if they look to be a problem.
So the decision is whether or not it gets deployed on the testnet. That's the decision we're trying to come to today.
Deployed and maintained in a way that it can be moved on. Yes.
And one thing that's part of that is also, Mika has a comment in the chat about Nethermind, but I'd like to hear just like from the other client teams about the status. Like, yeah, is like, because I guess there's kind of two things you can do there, right? Like if it is implemented in all of the other clients, then great. If it's not, then maybe if we go ahead and deploy it on the testnet, you just take the implementations that are ready today and, don't force it on other clients to implement it. So yeah, I don't know, Nethermind. I don't know if anyone from Trinity is on.
Yeah, I don't see a need to force it onto all clients as long as we have a reasonable number, and there should be enough warning if we make a decision that other clients can pull it in if we decide to go with it at some future point.
It's still good to get updates from the clients.
Of course, I want to hear that.
Are we talking about the Ethash replacement, like the ProgPow?
Yeah.
We don't have it connected, but I remember talking to Pavel about ability to connect the library. So I believe there is a C library for it, and the bindings to C from C# are really not that much work. So we never considered it would be a lot of work to add ProgPow if needed.
For Basu, I know we had an implementation, but I'm not familiar with what version of ProgPow it was. So I guess it would be, some work potentially to brush it up, but not starting from scratch. And I don't know if there's anyone from other client teams here. Sorry, there's more than one screen of participants on this call, which is, yeah, makes it hard to see everyone.
From Ethereum, this chains merged like 1.5 years ago. I'm not sure about status of that, to be honest.
Okay, so I guess we can assume also it would be like, you know, behind where it needs to be, and there need to be some brush up.
Yeah, we can assume that.
Cool.
So with regard to Open Ethereum, I think I remember a couple months ago, the Open Ethereum team announced that they just deleted all parts of ProgPow and they don't want to maintain it anymore and they don't want to support it. So it might be good to look into that part.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's still some changes in the code, but I'm not sure about status, to be honest.
So we talking about testnets. The YOLO v2 is a click network. Probably doesn't make sense to add a proof of work aspect to that. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, and just maybe to take a step back, I think it's worth considering, do we want this bundled with anything else at all, right? Just like because there, you know, there is the perception of like this moving forward and then being included on mainnet, despite still having some pushback in the community. Yeah, I'd like to at least like consider, if we go ahead and deploy this on some kind of testnet, it should probably be like isolated in a way. Yeah, I don't know if anyone feels strongly for or against that.
So essentially Ropsten is, we've talked about it for years, that Ropsten is getting too huge to be used and it's full of spam and it's pretty much everybody's just using Grinkaby or Gurley. And yeah, I think it would be perfectly fine to create a replacement for Ropsten. I mean, nobody wants to kill Ropsten, we can't kill it anyway. Just it would be nice to launch a proof of work testnet that's not Ropsten, and if we can just drop ProgPow on top of that. And it's not like we would lose the testability of ETH since mainnet is running ETH. So if you can participate in mainnet, then your code is probably correct. So there's no loss in not having an ETH testnet, in my opinion.
So would we have it if we were to release a ProgPow a proof of work testnet that had ProgPow on it? Would we want to just do it as is today, like at Muir Glacier, or should we wait for Berlin and have it be the new version upgraded, or should we? Does that
it's
even
better to separate these two things? So release the testnet and don't bind it with Berlin. It'll be easy to do the transition later.
Okay, so then we would launch it at Muir Glacier, a ProgPow testnet. A proof of work testnet that the new one that happens also to have ProgPow now.
Well, you can probably launch it on ETH and then switch over at block 10 or block 1000 or something, just so that the transition is somewhat tested.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Very
So then
good
that
idea.
for sure should be around with Muir Glacier code. So then we are operating on like real testing of not testing multiple things at the same time.
So I hope this doesn't derail things, and I don't want to, so we don't have to actually talk about this. But I think the reason that app developers are not using Ropsten isn't because it's too big; it's because it's constantly under attack. Like every time I try to do anything on Ropsten, I've got to wait half a day or trying to get mined because there's some miner out there who's farming Ropsten testnet ETH and refusing to include transactions. Again, I don't want to derail the conversation, but someone mentioned that Ropsten is too big, and I don't think that's the issue. It's the attacks on Ropsten that are the problem.
Yeah, probably both.
Yeah, it's a both thing.
Yeah, but anyway, so maybe devs will not use Ropsten or follow up to Ropsten anymore. but I still think Ropsten is pretty much unwieldy at this point. So I don't see. It would be nice to have an alternative, even if it won't get major usage.
So basically, what's stopping, the ProgPal? Like anybody can kind of start their testnet if they want, but like, yeah, what's stopping, the ProgPal people from going ahead with that? Is it the fact that like the testnet has to be started, by the get team?
But I
Is
think
it?
No, it's just the ProgPal is not merged in the client, so probably you
Yeah.
want to have it first merged in and just do some minimal client testing just to make sure that everybody seemingly is okay. Otherwise,
So it should be.
Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, I mean, the code should be merged and the bindings to activate it should be exposed so that somehow you can create the configuration or command line switches to activate it at a certain block. I think that's the ask.
And just, I guess, another kind of topic we've been talking a lot about in these past, I don't know, couple months is the fact that client teams have a ton of work to do and a limited amount of bandwidth to do it. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, is what you proposed, Martin, like, we just merge it in the client, you expose the bindings. Is that a way that we can just like enable people who want to work on ProgPal to go ahead and do it with like minimal involvement from the client teams if they don't want to be involved?
Yes, I think so, because yeah, then they are going to be able to use actual Geth version and they can spin up testnets with all the clients who implement it without having to use a PR, which is bit rotting away. And yeah, then we wouldn't have to, we wouldn't have to maintain a testnet on Geth per se. It could definitely be outsourced.
Yeah, and I guess that's just what I'm trying to get. Also from our team, I think it's something we don't, mind if it was included in the client and whatnot, but like there is the ongoing maintenance cost of the testnet, and yeah, I would rather not bear that cost if possible, but I'm curious, yeah, what other teams and also Greg, how possible you feel it is for like the ProgPal people to take on that cost, like if it was exposed in the clients. Yeah.
So I just want to point, we run quite a few nodes in the EF, and they usually require pretty big machines. But if this testnet is more about not that full blocks, if there are not going to be a lot of developers on it, and there's not a history of 10 million blocks, I think the actual hardware requirements running it are going to be fairly low. So the costs from that perspective are quite low, probably. Then, of course, there's a maintenance overhead. I don't think that's necessarily part of the ask. I don't think the ask is, hey, can Ethereum core developers please maintain a testnet for the next few years?
That's just what I want to make explicit, because again, like we've had all these calls and like people come away with different understandings. So yeah, is that something, Greg, you think would make sense for ProgPal if it was added as part of the clients in a way that allows, that allows people working on ProgPal to launch their testnet, to maintain it kind of as a first-class citizen of the client, but then to not have the core developers have the like maintenance burden and just, management burden of the testnet and then ending up discussing it on every core devs call and whatnot. It just feels like this one decision that can create like a lot of like ongoing work.
Yes, I think Martin's explained the work that's involved for the clients right now. I'm not asking right now for volunteers to or paid people to keep such a test net running. Just some commitment that we'll have to work on who's going to do that, like we always do. But I don't see doing that right now. If there's a commitment, someone will probably stand up to it, maybe me. And if nobody stands up to it, then like other things, it will fall by the wayside despite the commitments.
Sorry, just a quick point of order. Can I suggest that we try to move on to the next topic within the next couple of minutes? Because there is quite a lot on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yes, it's also very important to settle this. It's been years.
Yeah.
What else needs to be settled, though?
I'd like an actual statement published in the notes, numbered decision that we intend to stand by.
So is it
Check the chat.
yeah, is it what's the right word? Like, is it good for you if kind of the consensus is, you know, clients agree like to merge this, you know, outstanding PRs in, as long as, you know, they're kind of good quality and whatnot, and that will allow, you know, ProgPow champions or the ProgPow community to stand up their own test nets, and manage them as they want, but the client teams don't want to explicitly take on the responsibility of managing those networks, and having to discuss them on every core devs call and whatnot. Would that, I guess, first of all, does anyone like strongly disagree with that? And second of all, would that satisfy your concerns, Greg?
That's what I'm proposing. I'm hoping we have a consensus.
Yeah, for the guest team, Peter, you can, I don't know if you feel otherwise, but I think we're on board with that.
Yeah, sure. Works for us. I mean, we have the code. It would be nicer to have it merged in and not bitrot. Other than that, well, everyone can launch their own testnet, so there's no dependency on us, so to say.
So clients merge ProgPow code into the code base, so it's in a release. It isn't activatable for mainnet, but it is activatable for people making a testnet, and we encourage a new proof of work testnet because Ropsten is becoming big, and then that's it.
Yeah, and that testnet isn't necessarily maintained by all of us here. Yeah.
So I think that a nice approach would be to have the code merged in. That work depends on clients. Then the community can launch their own proof of work ProgPow testnet. And if that testnet seems to be in one piece after, I don't know, however many weeks or months, and if people feel like it, then clients can just add default configs to bake it in.
So what
Is that a sufficient decision for you, Greg?
Okay, so if I can state it clearly, the client teams are agreeing, those who are agreeing to merge their ProgPOW code. I believe that is essentially the code they already have, perhaps tweaking some constants, to merge it in a way that it can be activated on the mainnet, but it will not be activated on the mainnet at this time.
Yeah, I think that's it. And by, I think the activated on the mainnet part is maybe a bit confusing, like,
activatable.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be exposed in the client. It's like a feature you can use, right? But it's not.
But it's not being merged.
There's no block. There's no hard. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And just one last thing, and hopefully we wrap this up in the next minute after that. But Andrea has a question about what's the grade of trust we give to a non-official testnet. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has strong opinions there.
I don't get
it. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What can go wrong?
I don't think we've ever considered a differentiation between an official and a non-official.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean, the only thing about the PO8 testnets that we have is that they do require maintenance because someone has to actually run the signers and someone has to do the necessary unscrewing up when things are screwed up. For POW testnets, I mean, they just are. There's no maintenance really. There's no difference between unofficial and official since there are no authorities.
Yep.
I feel like that's a great place to end this conversation. So yeah, I think that'll be recorded in the notes. Hopefully, yeah, it doesn't come up on the next call.
Okay.
And we can all, like, do you feel like it's kind of addressed the uncertainty to work, Greg?
Yeah, can you state exactly in
Yeah.
English what the consensus is? And
I've already stated it, Greg,
okay, then
and it'll be
Then-
recorded in the notes.
okay, number decision, we're done with it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Tim, for handling that one.
Yeah, thank you, Tim.
We can move on to the next part. So the two things we have a couple people here who wanted to talk about their EIPs, but before we do that, something more pressing is both the YOLO V2 testnets and the feedback from breakout rooms, because there was some confusion and just general feedback about how that went since the last meeting. So let's start with YOLO V2 and just get some line items done there that James was wanting to talk about.
I actually wanted to have us talk about the EIPs related to YOLO V2 first.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's fine.
So move that down. We can have that be later. I want to make sure we get to the EIPs that need to be discussed relating to YOLO V2 first.
Okay, yeah, you can go ahead.
Well, that's the...
Or wait, am I missing something?
That is BLS. Oh no, I have now the agenda's changed again. Now I'm confused. The BLS curve EIP 20, 29, and 35, 15 are those EIPs.
Okay, like, can you go through each one maybe one by one and see the updates and give the name of the EIP?
Yes. Well, so that James Presswich came on to talk about the BLS 381, 377. So
that's going to be in reference to how, I hope I'm saying this right, Cello can help with it. I don't know if it's in reference to any updates that are related to YOLO V2.
yeah, I'm there. I'm not looking for updates on YOLO V2. I want the discussion for the EIPs to happen.
Okay, cool.
So
we can start with that one then if you want.
Yeah, so let's do the BLS curve, EIP 2929, and then 315. The EIP 315 discussions, because those are related to YOLO V2 decisions.
EIP 315?
Yes. 2315.
2315.
2315. I was leaving off the first number.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Then that would be James. If you wanted to give a quick, or James Prestwich, if you wanted to give a quick spiel for what you were wanting to talk about.
Yeah, so our main thing here is at Cello, we're planning our next hard fork, which is going to include a bunch of the things approved for Berlin. As part of that, we started looking at the history of EIP 2357, the BLS 381 precompiles, and stumbled onto 2359 as well. So Matter Labs, as part of the BLS precompile work, put together proposals for 3 different pairing groups. Last time this came up in an all-core dev call, it was decided to, because they're extremely similar precompiles, move forward with the one that has applications to ETH2, which is BLS 12381 EIP 2537, and to shelve the others until someone came forward with a concrete use case. So at Cello, we're considering EIP 2539 for inclusion. That's the 12377 precompiles, because we use BLS 12377 throughout. The 377 like curve groups also have some ancillary benefits to recursive ZKPs, not fully recursive, but one layer deep, and to Aztec and Alio and a few other like zero knowledge oriented projects in Ethereum. So what I wanted to talk about today is that we're going to be including both of these EIPs alongside each other and would love to be able to contribute the time, money, and people to upstream that work to Geth, Open Ethereum, and Nethermind.
So to be clear, the only curve that we've decided on for YOLO V2 or as inclusion to Berlin, either one, is the BLS 12381, not the 377. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
But you're wanting to contribute code for 377 for potential eventual inclusion into an Ethereum hard fork, right?
Yeah, we would like to contribute time and code to both of these because we're going to be building them into a Geth fork regardless. So we have already, high quality Go and Rust implementations for 377. The Rust is already implemented into Celo blockchain. The Go is by the same implementer who did the Geth 381 work. So because these precompiles are so similar, like they're almost spec for spec the same with the curves changed, we feel like it's very small additional work to include 2539 as well as 2537. And we're prepared to do a bunch of that work and would love to get it considered for YOLO V2 and potentially for Berlin.
I object.
Cool. Why Martin?
I don't think that it's, I mean, for YOLO V2, we're kind of hoping to roll it out like now, more or less, and just throwing in new curves, 12 new precompiles, because they share the same form as the previous ones. Yeah, I think they need to be fuzz tested from the ground up for a long time before there can be any, before it can be considered proven to be mature for anything.
Well, the implementations, especially in Rust, are already mature and deployed in the wild. The Go implementation, we are prepared to do the work for fuzz testing that and doing the integration work. We will be doing that ourselves for our own Geth fork in the next few weeks anyway.
James Hancock, what's your perspective on 377 in Berlin or YOLO V2? Because I have my opinion, but I'll hold off for now.
So I read the concern that the BLS precompiles are complex and require a lot of testing and fuzz testing. And so if Celo wants to do fuzz testing, I would think that would kind of help your concerns, Martin. But does it, like, if a team is willing to help with fuzz testing and resources to make sure that both are safe, and the core devs are still able to say, is it enough or not? Like, it isn't like we hand it off and say it's just going to be whatever. If they say it's okay, then it's okay. But if they actually do a lot of fuzz testing from the ground up for both precompiles, then does that help resolve concerns around security for both of those?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
So this is similar to the original BLS curves and the things, and the original BLS curves were fuzz tested for weeks on end and months on end, and then Martin came here with Marius and they found about 7 or 9 consensus bugs, including assembly issues. So from this perspective, the fact that an external team fuzz tested it is not assurance enough that it's actually correct. I think that's one of Martin's problems.
Well, here I should add from completely practical perspective. Well, first of all, change of BLS 381 to 377 is trivial parameterization change. So it can be just taken a current code base, butcher like 20 lines of code and make it for a new curve. And the second, it's always confusing when you say you found a lot of consensus issues. Yes, there was a problem with assembly, which wasn't caught by me in Go because I didn't try this particular assembly backend. But the rest of problems wasn't in the part which is not under the control of client developers. So like the biggest objection was that these precompiles are too complex. And there was never found an error in actual mass implementation for all these precompiles. There were some a little bit trivial mistakes in the integration of the code base, and some constants were wrong at some clients. So I think this is this is not like, I don't try to say that it's not a problem. It is still a problem. But it doesn't inflate the complexity of such changes in precompiles in general. And as just kind of history shows, like fast testing the core part, which can be considered like a black box by client developers, is first of all easier because it's stateless. And then which is done much more proper than it's usually what people think.
Yeah, so my point really wasn't to try to dig up past shit, rather, but my point I wanted to say is that there's always some room for some errors, and essentially it just requires effort, conscious effort from people who've been doing this for the past 5 years, just to make sure that it's actually okay. Maybe there's high chance that you are completely right, that if it's just changing a few constants, then it's probably not much that can go wrong. But still, I would argue that if you change a few constants, I don't know what implication that has on the assembly code. I don't know whether it takes different paths or not. So yeah, yes, you are right that there are probably nothing that can go wrong, but somebody still has to be convinced of that.
Yeah, so, I mean, there is always possibility that anything can go wrong with any change in the code base. But there should be some merits. What is sufficient to consider that this code is kind of safe enough to give it a try? And I just argue that for such changes, there are kind of separate parts. One is integration, another one is mathematical implementation. And that the latter can be very well tested, and there is already experience how to test it. And even the change in it can be very small.
Yeah, really quick, because this is like, we would not be considering this if it were not a minimal code-based change to the existing 381 work. Because it is so similar in implementation and the math is essentially identical except for parameter changes, Martin, would it be sufficient for you to consider it if we brought it up to the same testing and integration standards as the existing 381 work?
I am sorry to say no, because not that I don't, I mean, I think that if we want Berlin to happen anytime soon, then we should just put a lid on it.
Yeah, I was going to say that Martin's concern wasn't addressed the fact that we've kind of been doing this for a while with Berlin, and adding something at this stage in the game would just make it, that would provide a precedent that anyone could just come in after this point and add even more EIPs than we've already been adding, because last week we even added some more, like some stuff from one that is a security thing for DOSs and other stuff like that. I forgot the number of it, but yeah. So I think putting 377? What was the one? 377 in Berlin, BLS 12377 would be like not possible at this point. But that's my opinion. I wanted to hear what.
I mean, anything is possible, but I would object.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Is there any decision or like a time frame when people want to implement Berlin? If we just don't look at it as, well, we have to fix those vulnerability with just these changes to storage of code, so we have to rush it as soon as possible. Because Berlin was planned first to summers and was also way delayed. And so, I mean, I didn't see any dates or like some solid intentions for people to include it, and at least to understand what is sentiment in this area would be interesting to hear.
That is going to be a long conversation, and I want to wrap up my thoughts on where I am with this. So the sentiment of let's not add things to delayed Berlin, I definitely agree with. My current concern around the BLS precompiles in general is I still observe that there is more testing that needs to be done before it is considered safe for the network. And so if it's the case that adding this other EIP delays Berlin, then yes, I would agree with Hudson's point. If it's the case that we can have some more resources to help make sure that testing gets done, then in fact it could help make Berlin be sooner, because if both of them are being tested more, then the original BLS precompile EIP can reach a safer point quicker, which then means Berlin can be sooner. And
yeah, in case I wasn't like completely clear before, the proposal here is not we're just going to add a new EIP to the plate. What we'd like to be doing is spending time and resources on helping with the testing and integration of 381. And as a consequence, the testing and integration of 12377 becomes almost trivial.
Got it. Okay. You had mentioned that you had wanted both in Berlin. That's what confused me.
I would love to have both in Berlin, and I think that we can bring 12377 up to the same standard as 12381 very quickly. I'm not looking to push back or delay Berlin. This is if we can get it in on the time frame and to the same standard as the nearly identical approved EIP.
And help with the testing, and that's what the nuance of that I don't know. And the question is, if the CELO team is helping with the original BLS precompile testing, is that something that will accelerate us to being able to say it will be safe for mainnet?
Well, and will that happen regardless of if 377 goes in, or is that like a condition of CELO helping?
It is not a precondition. What we're doing right now is trying to plan our hard fork timeline, and part of that is going to be dependent on Berlin's timeline and what EIPs are approved and implemented for Berlin. We really like maintaining upstream compatibility, and we're trying to contribute back to the upstream repos more going forward. That's going to be a big chunk of my job from now on, is trying to help contribute back to Geth and Open Ethereum.
Okay.
It's not like a blocker for the resources, but we do need to understand this process a little better so that we can prioritize.
Understood. I think just to wrap this one up, because we don't need the Geth team to be a broken record, not in a negative way, but in a we've heard their concerns. Regardless of if people think they're valid or not, they are concerned. So it sounds like 377 won't be going forward at this point. From a decision standpoint today, it can definitely be brought back in the future as a item. But I don't think a decision on 377 is going to change today based on primarily on the Geth team's opinion. So
I have a quick process question on that.
Mm-hmm.
Reviewing the past all core dev calls, and as you said earlier, we approved EIPs as recently as the previous call. Was there a concrete decision taken to stopping that? What I would like to know is how we can better interact with and facilitate this process and make it easier on you guys going forward for the next time.
Sure. And I think the difficult thing in answering that is that each EIP has different levels of complexity, so it's treated with different levels of scrutiny on whether or not it can go into things like ephemeral testnets like YOLO v2 or into eventual hard forks like Berlin. So when it comes to what you can do to best get like solid decisions, it's going to be on a per EIP basis, but I can say for 377, my opinion on that is that because it is more complex, even if it is similar to 381, because it is still has high complexity and is different than a lot of the other, arguably more complex than any of the other EIPs going into YOLO v2 besides BLS 12381, that we where was I going there? That it probably like is going to require a lot more discussion, a lot more offline discussion. So I don't have a great answer for you. This process, the all core devs calls in this process has already always been messy. That's kind of how decentralized governance is, and I think that's the best I can give as far as an answer.
Can such a work in principle allow to set something which would be considered as standard for like how much any particular EIP or like let's say complex EIP should be worked on and tested to be included, not like in principle without objections that it's too complex if it's tested to a certain degree?
I am not, since I'm not on the testing team, I can't speak to that, but I can say that that doesn't sound like a bad idea in my opinion. That would be something if someone came up with those standards and then presented them to those who do the bulk of the work testing, it would kind of fall into their lap, since they're the ones doing the work. That's my opinion. So basically, I'm just kind of saying you can do whatever you want. Whether or not it's accepted by the broader people doing the work is another question. Did that answer your question, Alex?
Well, I mean, my question was just to have a certain degree of consistency in the process in general. And like this work by James, I hope it will allow to kind of make a standard for this. We already seen historically how like what work was done for 381 and with recent testing by guest team for consensus tests and state tests. So I think we can just try to follow the same process and document it a little more. So it will be just one-to-one correspondence, and then it will not scare people that it's just too difficult to implement.
Okay, I understand. Does anyone else have comment on that? I thought I heard someone unmute, but I could be wrong. Okay.
I have just a general one, which is I still am the biggest unknown for me related to Berlin is how much is sufficient testing for the BLS precompile, and at what point do we reach there? Just in general, like the EIP that is already being considered, because the rest of it is all pretty clear about what can happen and when can happen, and that's still kind of the unknown to me.
Well, here you can try to separate this into, I would say, 3 different parts. One is more or less historical from 1962, where there was a full spec with explicit implementation details on whatever you would want to do. So if you would implement it this way, like results will always be consistent if you implemented it properly. Then in principle, for more specific curve, BLS 12381, you could use external libraries, but then in principle, what you would want to do is at least to do kind of good case testing first, so that on inputs which are valid, you get the same results. And it's very difficult to get different results there. if you didn't implement it properly. Like it's very difficult to get the same results there if you didn't implement it properly on the same test vectors. Then goes negative result, negative inputs, but those are also dependent on the binary interface in the integration part, which is the third point.
Could we skip this?
Yeah, and then the fourth one will be integration into clients. So it's more or less this way, if I try to answer your question.
Well, I mean, to be frank, I am more confident that you are going to be okay with the amount of testing that needs to happen. It's the core devs in general. When does that point happen? So that's a question for the client developers, what that is. And that's just the current open question for me when it comes to Berlin and timing. And one of the reasons I haven't been as trying to say when there'll be a date, because I do not have a concept of when that will be for client developers.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
I think we understand the problem. We'll try to find a solution. I don't think that solution will come today, so let's move on to the next one.
Yep. Thank you, Hudson.
I think that's you, James, or was there other? There were other EIPs, right, for Yellow V2 that
Yeah,
you wanted?
there's other EIPs. The next one was 2929.
And that one was Vitalik and Martin, and there was someone had an update to that, I think, right? No, there was a question from Alex Vlasov about it that I think was addressed in the chat.
Yes, it was addressed in a GitHub conversation.
Okay, or I should say agenda.
Deep text wasn't up to date. That's it.
Okay. Are there updates on implementations for that? Is that what you're wanting to ask, James?
No, I wanted to have that was brought up as an issue. So if that was resolved, we can move on.
Okay. Last one, I guess, being 2315 simple subroutines.
Yes.
That's one that still has an open question from Greg about which version they're going with, I believe. Is that right, Greg? You're muted, Greg, if you're talking. Or can anyone else answer for that one? If Greg's unable to use tech right or like comms right now.
I mean,
Okay, I'm back.
You're probably right somewhere.
I'm back. If I unplug my, anyway, there's a question left, but we don't have time to take it up today. It can move to the magician's thread, but there's a proposal for preventing jumping in and out of subroutines, and we need to decide whether we want to include that part of the proposal. And I'm inclined at this point to say yes, but there's still one issue I need to understand, and probably.
Sorry, just one quick question on 2315. I'm not sure if this has been brought up before. Has anyone thought about interactions between 2315 and code merkleization?
You'd have to ask someone who's doing code merkleization.
Yes. Yeah, they have. That was part of Alex's Axig's suggestions was around code merkleization, and I believe Alexi, that was looked at by the ETH1X teams. The hope was that it'd actually make it easier. So from my memory, we had all agreed that we would do the said internal jumping features, except for Greg, you were still on the fence about it.
Yeah, it looks like it could break existing code to do more than we've already tested.
But am I remembering that right, Martin?
Yeah, that what?
That the adding in the feature to stop the Duff destinations was something everyone wanted, but Greg was holding back for.
More or less, yes. Well, and then we did this feasibility study kind of thing where we wanted to check. So if this was enabled, would it actually break contracts? And I dumped out all the contract code and analyzed them. And a lot of it was just false positives. And there are a few remaining ones which are basically contracts being used as storage. So that you, how is it now? You call it and then it does yeah, you delegate call it, and then it copies a chunk of its own code into memory. Sorry, into memory. Yeah, and kind of dynamically loads pieces of code. And those there are a couple of them which might be disrupted or not, but there was some manual work left, and we didn't quite finish the analysis because the ball was more or less dropped, with Greg being a bit opposed and no one really pursuing it.
So then is that something that if it got into YOLO v2, that kind of manual work could be done and finished and evaluated?
So I think I don't know if the implementations of this more advanced 2315 sufficiently ready to be merged into YOLO v2. There are, yeah, I mean, it's a bit more advanced implementation.
Now, I understood that what we're running now is ready to go. And
yes,
I think everybody's fine with what we have now. We have no issues with what we have now.
So then, so it will take a lot. It's a kind of a complex change. So it'll take more work than it's probably worth for YOLO v2. But so even though the previous consensus was everyone was, but if Greg is now agreeing that we should implement that feature, then if it's not for YOLO v2, we could still say that that is the new consensus.
There's the original proposal, and then there's a PR to make 2 changes. One of the changes was easy and has been merged. The other change was more difficult to implement, might break existing code. I found aesthetically displeasing. And so it's on the table as to whether to put it in.
That is the one.
Yeah, and I think the main proponents of the alternate versions are Alex Bergsasi and Pavel Biluka. And I don't know if they're on the call and if they're still pursuing this, or if they've
Axix on the call.
Do you have microphone available, Alex?
Yeah, I kind of lost track in the discussion, but if the question is whether I'm still in favor of this restriction, then the answer to that is yes. Yeah, I'm not sure. Was there any other question?
That was it. But Pavel isn't here. So
yeah,
he is here.
It's similar for me. I mean, so I was in favor of that change, but I think I can't say much more at this point because I wasn't like really keeping precise track of what's going on in this subject for longer. So I will need to update myself what is the exact status. I mean, I think we mostly had issues with feasibility of implementation of the change we proposed, and that was kind of resolved. But I think there's no final stamp on that part.
Yeah, it was implemented in Go Ethereum, and the thing is, this change adds quite a bit of an overhead to jumping, and it makes the VM more complex and adds some runtime overhead. I think it's fine based on a few benchmarking I did, but I think there's still quite a lot to implement if we wanted in another mind of BSU and Open Ethereum, whereas the existing one is ready to go.
Okay, so that would be a target for YOLO v3 kind of thing, and the original version is what will make it into YOLO v2.
I think that sounds like a better idea. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to get to come to a decision on whether, even if we agreed on it, if it should be for scheduling for YOLO v2 or YOLO v3. And it seems like the consensus or the agreement is that although the we're leaning towards making the decision a yes. It shouldn't be done for YOLO V2.
That sounds right to me.
Cool. Thank you. That's all I had, Hudson.
Okay, great. We can move on to the next item then, unless was there? Yeah, that was it. You said. Okay, so we tried a thing where we had a breakout room chat in the Discord, and we had some calls that were made. I think in the process of doing that, there was some confusion about the purpose of both the chat room and the calls, because it was kind of talked about differently and a little bit like not as clear as we could have made it. So, Pooja, since you did a lot of the work around that, can you describe in practice how you think the breakout room Discord chat and the call went, and then we can get other opinions too, and then we can better define it right, after we talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So first, let me provide the overview of what happened in past 15 days. So there were 2 meetings concluded in past 15 days since the last all core dev meeting when we decided to have this channel. It was on consecutive Monday at 1400 UTC. The goal was to collect feedback from the clients on proposal and get a consensus to move ahead with the implementation on certain proposals that were discussed in the core dev meeting itself, and then update the client status in the core dev meeting. Originally, it was planned for having like 1 EIP per breakout meeting, but the group thought that it would be good to have discussion on the YOLO V2, and both the meetings were dedicated on that so that they can come up with some conclusion on which EIP to be implemented. The agenda and the summary is added in the Ethereum/PM GitHub. And there was some discussion / confusion around the meeting channel, as Hudson mentioned. Well, it's something new, so a little bit of confusion is understandable. It was also discussed in the last meeting when we had this breakout meeting about the frequency, like how often we should have it. The general feeling was like we can have it once a week, but for a shorter duration, like 30 to 45 minutes only. Like people can come, try to talk about 1 or 2 proposals, just discuss and go back to work. And this schedule, the proposed schedule, is not forever, but it's on a need basis. Right now, clients are working on YOLO V2, so maybe once a week is a good catch up for them as well, rather than having it in 2 weeks. And this meeting does not need like 20-25 people like in all core dev meetings. Just 6 to 10 people, 6 clients, and then the author of the proposal and people who are implementing and people who have concerns or suggestion are welcome to join. But at the same time, yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
I'll just take a couple of more minutes and I'll be finished. So at the same time, I understand these meetings to be productive. It's important that we get representation from most of the clients, and it is not possible for everyone to keep track of every channel, what is going on and when a meeting is planned, because we are generally publishing it in the channel when the meeting is planned. So I can add the author /implementer /champion or /people who are needed for that meeting in the agenda as well as the breakout room channel. Also, I'm also taking care of calendar invite that is going out every week. So if people are interested and comfortable sharing the email, please email me on Discord. And I think that this can be a way to bring people together and have them on the same page.
Okay, so I was under the impression that these rooms were on an as needed basis, which is kind of what you said, right?
Right.
And that I didn't think that every client needed to attend. I thought it was only the people involved in the sub discussions. So for instance, like an EIP, like if there's an EIP and there's a few people arguing over the semantics of it, then only they need to come to the meeting to discuss their differences, because not every client may be invested in that decision.
Right, but what happens when group is taking a decision on a particular proposal? Generally, it is better to have every client's representation to get their consensus if they want to get involved or want to implement that proposal or not. So I mean, like, for example, I just have shared the link of the next agenda. So it includes 3 EIP. EIP 2935, that is save historical block hashes, EIP 2718, type transaction envelope, and EIP 2972, wrapped legacy transaction. So if, I mean, of course, the author are important here. People who are implementing these things are important. If client's representation is also there, I think the decision-making process could be faster.
What do other people think? Because there's kind of two ways we could go there. We could go with people just as needed, or as many clients as can attend.
I would rather it not be all core devs part 2, and have it be a place to talk, to have more specific conversations that not everyone needs to attend.
And I think it might be that if someone wants to use it, they can use it, but it may be like the organizers like me and James and Pooja shouldn't be dictating what gets a breakout room. It maybe should be more the all core dev participants, so that can make it more so it's as needed. Unless there's like a really big issue that's not coming out, like getting resolved or something. What was that, Micah?
I think the one request I would have for these breakouts is that if in all core devs, which is where they break out from, someone has a strong opinion, negative or usually negative, about some EIP, that person shows up to kind of argue it at the breakout. Because that kind of the whole point of the breakout, right? So we can take those arguments out of the all core devs call, so our core devs call can be productive, and then we can debate that somewhere else. And if only the author shows up to the breakout, then we have to wait until next week, and we argue back in the all core devs call again. And so it'd be nice if whoever is like the antagonist for keeping something out or whatever could actually show up to the breakout.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that, because that means that you just organized another meeting for us all.
So you're just not a fan of breakout rooms in general, or the way we've designed them?
But the point of, well, for example, Martin opposes one of the EIPs, which means that if essentially you just assign Martin one more meeting every time somebody wants to do something, because since he's the security lead, he's going to be arguing against every single EIP from a security perspective.
Yeah, I got what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, we do want to avoid that, so
So we shouldn't be compulsory trying to get people into the calls. I do think that if we have, I mean, I understand, Micah, that it's important that we get the people to talk about something on the call, and that if we don't have the right people, then a decision can't be made. But we should just accept that if the people aren't there to make a decision, then we're not able to make one. And
yeah, I think that as long as that's clear up front, so we can just not have the call. Like it kind of sucks to schedule a meeting for an hour and schedule your day, and then you show up, and then the person who needs to be there to talk to doesn't show up. I would rather just not have the call at all in that case, which is fine. Like I'm not saying this is bad. Just I think that is important to save everybody's time. That
Yeah.
It's clear who's going to be there ahead of time, so we know. Hey, if Martin's the only person that opposes this, just use this as an example, and he's not going to be there, then the rest of us shouldn't bother showing up. So we're all going to agree and waste each other's time.
got it. Okay. Yeah, setting expectations.
And then I also think that it's worth, because we have discussions that start kind of going core devs, and it would be great if the organizers like Pooja and us would be able to point out, okay, this is something that's worth a breakout room, and then if the participants agree, then we organize and schedule it for them, and we get like that. Because if it's just left to the clients to happen, I also don't think it's going to there's got to be some kind of scheduling force to do it. But having a breakout, something is taking too long on all core devs. Okay, we'd have more discussion that needs to happen. Let's not take 45 minutes on it here. Let's take that 45 minutes and make sure we have the right people there to talk about it, and then that happens in a breakout session.
The other suggestion I saw from the breakout room chat was, I forgot who said this, I think a few people maybe, but having more synchronous communication lines, or not more, but utilizing the ones we have, like ETH Magicians, and really, figuring out if people have, like, basically holding people to discussions there so that we get some kind of consensus around issues that pop up. there needs to be a balance between no action and between no action at all and forcing people to do something. There should be an in between, because otherwise there'll just be ossification, as there already is in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and the coordinating, getting those parties together and talking is good.
So the one thing that I find as not like very good about like asynchronous communication here is that things get delayed for a very long time. Like conversation does happen in the other magician forum and other places. We have different channels for that. But if there are some proposals that we might want to come to a conclusion real quick, I think these breakout rooms might help. But of course, it is completely dependent on what everybody here in the group thinks. Like if they agree, if they want to show up, they want to continue this, I'll be happy to organize it. But if it is something, yeah, I mean, completely up to the group.
Like an example of a good one, I don't think we should do it this time, but for the subroutines 2315, like a continued discussion on what needs to be done or what is done, and have the people that are there show up for it, is something that would fit, because there's still some unknowns and more discussion to have. We don't need to have that here, and a lot of it can happen in a breakout room, and then we can report on the discussion to the all core devs for an official decision.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, something like that would work. I think a good in between is basically the breakout room is open for people to use whenever they want. It's not going to be about a specific topic unless they say, I want it about this specific topic right now, as a temporary topic that we discussed in a core dev meeting and we had like issues on. We should push first for asynchronous communication in the ETH Magicians thread and in the all core dev chat, and or whatever other means of asynchronous communication you want to use. And then if that doesn't work after a single core dev meeting, that's when there's going to be suggestions for a breakout room. If there needs to be better communication that's quicker and holds people a little more accountable. I think that's fair, a fair ask to get things moving a little bit. It's a trade-off because it is kind of, like Peter was saying, kind of forcing people who might need to be involved in a lot of these decisions into the ring. But for important decisions that really aren't solved asynchronously, I think the breakout rooms are important.
And the it shouldn't be, the focus should be on getting consensus, not making a decision. So having everybody understand and resolve concerns, and the decision making can happen on this call. So that's why, that way we don't have to have all clients on the call.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So any other comments on this before I kind of say what was just said again as one of the decisions?
Just wanted to have clarity on the call that is scheduled. Like if like in the last meeting, people suggested to have this meeting on Monday, and they wanted to discuss these proposals. So is it still valid? Because this was supposed to be updated based on the all core dev meeting. What is the decision here?
What was the meeting on Monday going to be about? Just a general list of EIPs or certain ones?
Those are for the EIPs considered for YOLO V2.
Are there any major disagreements in the EIPs decided for YOLO V2 currently, besides anything related to testing around BLS 12381?
There's one 2935. Unfortunately, in absence of any champion, that could not have been discussed in the previous two meetings, though it was like in the agenda. So people wanted to discuss that to be considered or not to be considered.
Interesting. Okay. What do people in the call think? Just so I'm not talking continuously.
The Micah's points of 2935 and 2718 are stuff to still talk about that we didn't get to today. So talking about that on a breakout call would be great.
Since it's already scheduled and people probably already have it in their calendars, it might be a good idea to go ahead if anyone can make it. Something fruitful will come of it, and then we can really start the new set of expectations after the Monday meeting. Does that sound good?
And the role the cat herders can do is figure out who needs to be there and then figure out if they can be.
Yeah. Sounds good. We'll go ahead with that. Next up, we have account abstraction update. There's an explainer posted by Sam Wilson, and I think Sam's here today if you want to quickly go over kind of what the updates are with account abstraction, Sam.
Sure. So Vitalik and the rest of the Quilt team, and the Quilt team rather, we've put together an explainer for the EIP, and the EIP has also been published. We're kind of wondering what the next steps are to get it considered for inclusion. But yeah, I think we're at a pretty good state now that we want to get some feedback from people who would use account abstraction and people who would be implementing it.
And also, hi, Ansgar here from the Quill team as well. So just to very briefly point out, we think actually that the important difference from the EIP to previous proposals on account abstraction is that we were successful in bringing the consensus changes down to like a very simple minimum. So right now in our proposal, the consensus changes would only be around a new transaction type in combination, obviously, with the type transactions EIP, and then a nonce opcode that might even be broken out of the EIP. It's just returning the current transaction nonce, and a pay gas opcode that pays for an AA transaction. And that's literally it. And then we have quite a bit of rationale about how we would avoid all the issues that are usually associated with account abstraction, like basically, I think it's sometimes people talk about amplification attacks and all of these things. So basically the idea is that mempools have very strict rules about what kinds of AA transactions they accept. Those are also rather simple, but they're like just on the mempool level. And then the nice thing about that is that you could start with a very restrictive set initially that only supports limited single user use cases, and you'd already get some benefits of AA, right? You have native bundling, you have other forms of signatures they could use and all of these things, but it's only like for single user use cases. And then later on, you could just basically add or like extend these mempool rules without ever like adding any further consensus changes to allow for these more advanced AA uses. And so I think that like because of in the past AA had like rather complex consensus implications that people are rather skeptical, but with these recent changes, and we try to really like boil that down to like a very simple, easy to read, to understand like explainer. We think that it's really not that big of a change anymore, and we just, as Sam said, we just basically at this point would want to hear some feedback on like whether the core developers think this is something that could potentially move forward to being considered for inclusion, or if there are any major concerns for us to address.
Okay, people will look at that and we can get back to you on that. Where should they give you feedback? Is there like an Ethereum Magicians thread or something else?
There is. So we initially linked to the old discussion. We thought that wasn't a good idea. So now we created a new ETH Magicians post. It's still a pending PR to the EIP. So you have to be a little bit careful to find the right ETH Magicians post, but it's easy to find. And also you can find us in the R&D Discord. We have an account abstraction channel there as well.
Okay, thank you. We have about 3 minutes left, and I think the last EIP related thing, other than the 1559 update, if we have time, is EVM 384 from AXIC. If you want to go ahead with that, just if you can make it pretty short, AXIC, that'd be great.
3 minutes is tough. So this is an update on the work we have done in the past 4 weeks. And most of the work was actually done by Paul and Jared from the team. So last time, 4 weeks ago, we had 3 different versions of the opcodes, and we had a Yule implementation, and we had numbers on how those compare. And we have advanced on both directions because we had a hunch that the code in Yule might not be the most optimal one, and we thought that half as a language might be better. And we also had some ideas how to improve maybe bottlenecks on the opcodes. So one bottleneck, the major bottleneck we had on the opcodes is a number of stack items, each of them required. I shared a document which explains 4 different versions of the opcodes we went through in the past 4 weeks. The important one is the last one, V7, which has a single stack item and packs memory offsets into that single stack item. So this might sound a bit weird, but this is the This is the version which has the least amount of changes compared to how the EVM operates today, and provides all the speed benefits we have found. And then regarding the half versus Yule, I don't have the number handy, but I think, just as an example, one of the versions, the half version was, how much is that? Yeah, the half version was like 40% more efficient than the Yule version. So it was a good indicator that we should focus more on the half version. And the end result is that basically from what were we at 4 weeks ago with the version 3 and Yule, that was roughly 18 milliseconds. Compared to that, with the half and the V7 option, we are at 5.5 milliseconds. And comparing this 5.5 milliseconds to, at least on this single benchmark against the native code, it is 5.5 milliseconds versus 4.3 milliseconds for the native code. So I think this gives us a really good indication that we are on the right track to be really performant. And we think that this V7 design is something which is unlikely to change in any major way. And probably it is a good time to encourage people to maybe write an actual proper pairing operation using these opcodes. And we also suggest to take a look at the half code we have as an inspiration on how to do it efficiently. Once we have such a pairing implementation written, I think we could make a final decision whether this is an actual solution compared to the precompile. But the numbers suggest that this is really promising. The numbers are really good.
Okay, thank you. We're about a minute over. Where can people go to get the latest on 1559, Tim? Or actually, if you want just a minute, I think you can do it.
Yeah, I think it's probably, so I mean, to get the latest, there's a Discord channel. We have monthly calls, and I post them on Twitter. Happy to link those wherever people want. I think what would help 1559 now, more than just like general updates, is getting a feeling for what core developers see as the major risks. So the last time there was a proper update on the EAP was, I don't know, call it 6 months ago. And I believe the major risk that was highlighted was the fact that the network might just not be able to handle blocks that are twice the size of current blocks, even if it's for a very short period of time. So that's something we're working on addressing right now, and building small test nets to test and gradually growing them. But I think what would be most valuable for the people working on 1559 is knowing, are there any other kind of major objections or major issues that people see with the proposal, and what's kind of the next best time to bring it back to all core dev? Is it once we have data that says, like, here's an intuition that proves that like we could handle these blocks for a while? Is there something else people would want to see? Yeah, I think that'd be the most useful thing. And I don't know if we have time to do that now, if we want to put it maybe as the first thing on the next call.
I'd say first thing on the next call, and do some asynchronous digging until then within text form, like in the core dev chat and stuff, just asking straight up so we have a little bit of answers before then.
Yeah, we did that 2 weeks ago and there wasn't really any answers, so that's, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's have it be the first item next time, and if people can get a chance to respond to Tim, that'd be really helpful. Okay. The next meeting is going to be October 2nd, 2020. That's in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and have a good weekend.
Thanks, Hudson. Cheers, all.
Thank you.
Bye.